I'm Jonah Hull in Munich, where global policymakers are gathered for the annual security conference. Among them, Josep Borrell, the European Union's foreign policy and security chief, a man who faces many challenges, from Brexit to US tariffs, from the Iran nuclear deal to managing relations with eastern giants like China and Russia, and of course festering conflicts in places like Libya and Yemen. The list is long. Can the ties that bind EU member states endure all this? Is there a common vision for the European Union's future? We'll find out as Josep Borrell talks to Al Jazeera. Josep Borrell, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, many thanks for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
You're part of a new European Commission, there's a new European Parliament, a new EU, in fact, 27 members minus the United Kingdom. But you've got real problems. You've got people like President Macron of France, a sort of very powerful reformer pushing for more integration. You've got a kind of steady as she goes Germany at the moment, struggling with a leadership flux. You've got rule of law issues, nationalism, populism in places like Hungary and Poland. How do you reconcile all
That's
these
life.
things?
That's life. It is the way it is. And we are not going to change these things overnight.
But it does make it difficult for Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President's view of a new geopolitical Commission, a geopolitical EU based on shared sovereignty. How do you create this sense of shared sovereignty?
Working together. I'm building the feeling that the threats that we are facing are indivisible. That the threat of terrorism in Libya, or the illegal migrants flow in Libya, is not just a threat for the Mediterranean countries. As much as the threat of the Russian can represent a threat to some member states in the eastern borders, is not only for them. We have to share common threats, and this requires a culture. It is not going to be done overnight, you know. It's a matter of overcoming our past histories in order to build a common understanding of the world. If you don't share a common understanding of the world, you cannot share a common foreign policy.
But ultimately, a lot of this sense of change, the need for reform, has come about as a result, most recently, of Brexit, which has been, hasn't it, a colossal blow for the European Union, losing a member like Britain.
That's a pity. We regret. We are not going to be completed without the United Kingdom. But the British had two opportunities to decide about their future. First, they hold a referendum, and secondly, they hold elections. And in both cases, especially on the second one, the Brexiters won. So there is no way out. It is the way it is. We regret, but we will try to do our best without the British and to try to build a better relationship with them. But for sure, I think it will not be the same, neither for them nor for us.
To what extent does Brexit undermine the European Union's ultimate standing in the world?
The Union, I don't think the British leaving is undermining the Union. The British never, they have always been very clear, no? Since the speech of Winston Churchill in Zurich on the aftermath of the Second World War, saying, you Europeans go and build the United States of Europe, but we will not be with you. We will be looking to the Atlantic. The British have never hidden his will. They have never been in favor of a bigger integration. They have never been in favor of a political union. So they are not the only ones. Other member states are on the same attitude.
On that point of other nations that are also agitating along British lines, it's important for the EU to
Brexit,
make the breakup as difficult as possible for Britain, isn't it, in order to dissuade or discourage others?
There is no need to dissuading anyone, because the Brexit has not been an epidemic, it has been a vaccine. Instead of widespreading,
brought people together.
It has been a vaccine, because people said, oh, look at how difficult it is. Look at the consequences.
So anyway, the need for change is clear and undisputed. Brexit has highlighted that. But as much as anything else, the United States and China, two great powers, squaring off against one another now in a, as I said, fast-changing geopolitical environment. You wrote this: to survive in the world of giants, we Europeans must adjust our mental maps to deal with the world as it is, not as we hoped it would be. To avoid being the losers in today's US-China competition, we must relearn the language of power. What did you mean by that?
This is a sentence that has become famous. When you say power, people immediately think on military power. Power means that you are sending tanks. No, there are many different kinds of power. When the Americans use their laws in order to everybody being abiding by their laws, and a European company has to abide by the American law, even if this law has been voted by the American Parliament, and in principle this transnational implementation of the law is completely unjustified, but they have the power of doing that. Now, if you do what I don't like you to do, you will be punished. Well, the Europeans, we are not able of doing so.
Well, you say you're not able to, and yet in this vision
we are not willing.
Well, in this vision of a new geopolitical future for the EU, there's talk, isn't there, of only doing deals with countries if they sign up to the Paris Climate Accords. For instance, there's a big push now on digital taxes on US tech giants. There is suggestions that European businesses might withdraw their support for US and Chinese markets if they don't open themselves up to EU competition. The problem is, as soon as you do these kinds of things, people like the US slap tariffs on EU products, as they've done with steel, as they've just done on Airbus. So Ursula von der Leyen wants to push a more muscular vision of the EU, but the hard power isn't there to back it up.
Well, the difference between hard power and soft power nowadays is a little bit fuzzy. Trade, is that a hard power or soft power?
Well, at the moment that's a grey area, isn't it? But traditionally the EU has relied on soft power. It's beginning to look a bit dated in this new
but today,
thrusting, muscular
these differences, these categories, has been very much mixed and confused, no? Which is soft power and which is hard power. To interfere in the democratic process of one country using civil capacities, is that soft or hard? The fact is that today...
Depends who's interfering and what they're doing, isn't it?
Well, but the interference in your democratic process, you don't use arms, no? You use digital technologies, but it can be very, very, very damaging. You know, the future of the defense, it's not only about the risk of being invaded by an army, but the risk of being interfering on your institutions building and working by the new methods that technology brings to us. Cyber attacks, all the means and tools that today many people can use, and they have been using. Cyber is one of the most worries that we should face. Cyber and hybrids. Something that people are not yet very much aware of what does it mean. And at the same time, we have hard challenges, the old-style hard challenges, like, for example, in Sahel. You know how many soldiers the Sahelian armies lost last year? 1,500. The terrorists, the bandits, the people fighting among each other killed 1,500 Malians, Nigerians, people.
And this is an area of big strategic interest in the EU, of course, because with all of that fighting come waves of refugees heading for Europe.
If the whole Sahel becomes a non-state land without no authority, then the risk for Europe is very, very big, because this population...
Do you have a plan for the Sahel?
We don't have a plan. We have called a conference for the Sahel next month in order to try to have a strategy. We are there, the French mainly, but other member states are helping. The European Union as a whole have several missions, military and civilian missions. The United Nations have 15,000 soldiers in Mali, but it seems that they are not very effective. So, you know, Libya has been a kind of tumor who have been metastasizing on the South Sahel countries, and Europe cannot afford to lose control of this area where the population is growing at incredible pace, where women have having 7 or 8 children per head in average. So the growth of population, the effect of climate change, the non-authorities, the absence of an organized civil and political society in such a big extension with a growing population is a danger for Europe.
Talking about defence, talking about hard power, one of the great fractures at the moment is in the transatlantic relationship. Some people deny it's there, other people say it's glaringly obvious. Donald Trump insisting that Europeans do more for their own defence, President Macron a great supporter of that. Talking to Anders Fogh Rasmussen the other day, the former NATO Secretary General, he suggests this is fanciful, a paper tiger. Europe simply can't afford to secure itself without US help. Is there a future for a European defence system, a European army, a Europe standing on its own 2 feet without US help?
Well, Rasmussen is right. That's not a matter of ideological position. It's a matter of arithmetic. It's a matter of numbers. I am an engineer by training, and when I have to discuss something, I go and I look to the numbers. It's completely out of question that the European states could ensure their territorial defense out of the NATO. And secondly, the European Union is not a defense union. Was not created as the NATO to ensure a military solidarity of all member states.
Well, that's because NATO was always something that was taken for granted, not so much in the age of Donald Trump.
Well, that's true, but at the same time, what we have to do is spend more on defense. On that, President Trump is right. But we have to think about where we spend more and for what. We have to discuss about the strategic objective of more expenditure in defense, and we have to spend better. You know, there is such a big diversity between the European armies, so many overlaps, so many vacuums where we don't have capacities, and in another place we have too much capacities, that a big effort has to be done in order to build military capacities among the European member states' army, not to create the European army, but to coordinate the efforts of all of us in order to have, among all of us, the capacities that are required. It will be much, much, much less expensive.
Okay, let's look at EU foreign policy proper, your day job, as it were, when you're not engaged in reforming the European Union. The Iran nuclear deal, 2015, the EU took a good chunk of the credit for sealing that deal with Iran. It's now falling apart. Of course, Donald Trump exited it. And there's enormous pressure, isn't there, from the United States on European signatories to toe the line and do likewise. Is the EU close, finally, to caving in now and accepting that the Iran deal is over?
Not by the... You know, I am the coordinator of the board that follows the implementation of this nuclear deal. In this board, there are Russia, there are China, there were the States, there are 3 European countries, well, now 2 European member states of the European Union and another European country, because the British has left the European Union, but they are still Europeans. And I have the role of coordinator. And as far as I know, the Europeans are still striving to keep this deal alive. But in order to keep this deal alive, we should be able to ask the Iranians to fulfill their commitments on the nuclear side, and we should be fulfilling our commitments on the economic side. But we are not doing that by the time being, because our firms are afraid of the American retaliations, sanctions. We are trying to build financial instruments in order to be able to do economic transactions, especially on the humanitarian side, without falling under the American sanctions. This is one thing in which we are in a different position with our American friends. On the most important issue, we will be all the time on the same side of the table. But here, we disagree. We don't agree with Americans' withdrawal from this nuclear deal. It took 12 years of very difficult discussions to reach this deal, and I don't think it's going to be possible to build another one. Thanks to this deal, Iran is not a nuclear power today. Without this deal, who knows what's going to happen in the future?
Like so many things, though, American might is insurmountable. You may well disagree, but in the end there's nothing you can do about it, and there's no way you can win the argument.
We try to do something. We are creating this INSTEC instrument in order to avoid American sanctions. Frankly speaking, this is what it's about, no? To avoid American sanctions.
Of course, and creating an incentive for Iran
for the time being, with the time being, we haven't been able to make it work. And I have to recognize that the Iranians, you know, I try to be somewhat objective and measuring the positions of each other according with the reality, according with the facts. 40 months after the American withdrawal, the Iranians has been fulfilling with their commitments. And the European leaders have been promising them that they should continue fulfilling their nuclear commitment because we will look on a way of having economic sanctions. They did. Recently, they said that's enough. We are going to go out slowly of these nuclear commitments, and we try to convince them to go back to the commitment on the nuclear side if we can provide some rewards on the economic side. The game is not over. The game is not over. Let's see what's happening in the following month.
Well, if nothing else, it's a sign what has happened with Iran, that a very different kind of global foreign policy is underway and has been for the last 4 years. A very much more muscular, bruising, confrontational foreign policy in which, as we said earlier, the European Union's old approach of soft power doesn't really work, doesn't apply.
It works. No, we have not dismissed the power that gives you the capacity of intervening on the respect of human rights, to sign trade agreements, to set up norms. We don't have to dismiss it. It's very important. The normative capacity that we have is a way of conditioning many economic and technological development and trade. We are the champions of trade. We introduce on the trade agreements the thing that really worries us, like climate change. Then we have a strong power, strong capacity of influencing. No? But it's true, the world that we are facing is not the world that it's behind us. It's north, west, south, east, north, south, west, east. They are really the categories that have to be used in order to analyze the world of tomorrow. Well, I don't think so. I think that this belongs to another period of the history, and now we are driving to a bilateral competition, a duopoly of power between China and United States. This is the rhythm of the history. This is where we are heading. And for Europeans, the important thing is to find our place on this competition, not to be scratched on the middle of these two giants competition.
Well, let me ask you now about Russia, another issue that divides member states. President Macron of France thinks that the EU, that Russia is a viable security partner for the EU. Do you?
Well, with Russia, we have principles that guide our relationship. We have to continue saying that we support Ukrainian integrity, and the best way of containing the Russian influence on the eastern part of Europe is to support Ukraine economic and democratic development. The sanctions are there, they will not be lifted unless there is some change in the Russian attitude. But on the other hand, we have to engage selectively with Russia because we share common concerns on many issues. Can we talk about the Arctic policy without engaging with Russia?
Of course not.
Not. Can we discuss about our energy autonomy or security without talking with our big provider of gas? There are so many issues in which we have to talk with Russia, to engage and to reach agreements, that we have to have a two-sided policy.
Libya. A brand new UN Security Council is in place calling for a ceasefire. You said back in January, when the previous ceasefire was as fragile as it was, that a ceasefire only exists when it's monitored and managed.
Any ceasefire has to be monitored. If it is not monitored, it lasts 2 days. But by the time being, we are still not there. If the ceasefire comes, then someone will have to monitor it. The United Nations should do it. And we Europeans, we should be able to cooperate with them. How? Well, it will depend.
Well, what more is the EU prepared to do? I mean, this is a humanitarian disaster in the making for Europe. All of the refugees, all of the people in awful conditions on Libya's shores.
Today, the flow of migrants to Europe has been decreasing very much. We have in mind the big peak of the 2015, 2016. Everybody has in mind these 2 years, big flow of people, 160,000 people getting across the Mediterranean. Today we are in figures much, much lower. The problem has changed dimension completely.
Israel-Palestine. Is there any part of the new Trump plan that you support?
This plan doesn't fulfill the internationally recognized parameters and the parameters on which the European Union is being working. So either we change our parameters, we change our mind, or we cannot say that this plan is a good plan from our understanding. But at the same time, this plan has the capacity of breaking the stalemate and putting the conversation between Israelis and Palestinians again on the table. So it's not enough with saying this plan is not good. You have to propose something else. And now we have to look at if we are able to propose something better, or how can we use the opportunity that this plan offers to break these 4 or 5 years without nothing.
Climate change, another big issue, perhaps the preeminent issue facing the future of the planet, not least the EU. The European Union has shown its commitment with a Green Deal over the next 5 years. You took some fire recently with comments you made about young climate activists, suggesting that people like Greta Thunberg don't really have the stomach for a fight, that they don't understand and aren't willing to pay for the changes that they demand. You called it Greta syndrome. Do you regret that?
Look, please say what I said, not what do you interpret I've said.
Well, you said it's fine to demonstrate against climate change so long as nobody asks you to pay for it.
Exactly. I wonder if everybody is aware of the fact that we have to fight climate change, but it is not a free lunch. Not to fight against climate change puts an existential threat. To fight against climate change is not for free. It will require investment, it will require a big restructuring of a way of living, and this will have a cost. And it will be winners and losers. And the winners have to be ready to compensate the losers. That's where putting on the table a just transition fund for climate change. And what I wanted to say is that a politician have to explain people all sides of the kind. We don't have to make people believe that to fight against climate change is just a matter of, I want it. Yes, but in order to do that, it's going to be, we are going to face big transformation. It's very good that the young people mobilizes. It's very good that young people are very much aware than the old people of the high cost of not fighting against climate change. But one thing is that the climate change represents a big threat and a high cost, and another thing is not to be aware that fighting against climate change also represents a cost, and this has to be paid.
Finally, Catalonia. You are a proud Catalan, of course, yourself. The issue of Catalonia goes to the heart of concerns across the EU about nationalism, about sovereignty, the rights of minorities. As Spanish foreign minister, you were no supporter of separatism, of course, I understand that. As EU foreign minister, I wonder, this problem is not going away. Do you in any way support a legitimate say for the people of Catalonia in their future, even if it means changing the constitution to allow, say, a referendum to take place?
We can change the constitution, but I don't think there is a majority in Spain to change the constitution.
So how do you deal with this problem? How do you make it go away? How do you reconcile Catalonia and Madrid and the rest of Spain?
It's not Catalonia. When you say Catalonia...
So very close to 50% of Catalans.
Well, and the other 50%? It seems that you don't take them into consideration.
No, I mean, there is division in Catalonia and division in Spain. But all of it has to be reconciled.
But you see your trap to talk about Catalonia, referring only to the 45%. When do you use Catalonia to refer to the 45%? What I refuse is this assimilation between Catalonia and less than half the Catalans.
I understand. Josep Borrell, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.